For Pride Month, I thought it might be interesting to put down in metaphorical writing some of my thoughts about progressive themes in Jurassic Park, specifically themes of anti-capitalism and feminism. Now, certainly this is going to be subjective. Some of the things I'll point out are potentially coincidental. You probably shouldn't take anything I say in this video as objective fact. Now, while we'll approach this video largely in chronological order, we must first address a broader point that drives a lot of the discussion. We have to talk about Hammond. Hammond, fundamentally, is an old, rich capitalist, a common concept for a villain. The novel makes his villain nature much more explicit, of course, whereas the film tones it down, changing Hammond's overt malice into something more resembling negligence. With Hammond being portrayed by Richard Attenborough, a more sympathetic take is a completely reasonable approach. But if you analyze the film with a more critical eye, you can still see that Hammond is a pretty problematic figure. The film opens with workers moving a raptor into the holding pen. Bits of presumably Spanish dialogue can be heard throughout, given the impression that most of the workers hail from Costa Rica or other Central American countries. The safety measures provided are clearly inadequate, and the automation and high technology that Hammond talks about throughout the film is largely absent. This is a peek behind the curtain, a look at the day-to-day operation of Jurassic Park, separate from the sterilized show presented to the evaluation team that tours the park later. Like many real-life Western corporations moving abroad, local workers are hired, and costs are kept down by providing poor protection for the workers. When Joffrey is killed, we see how the workers pay for Hammond's mistakes. In subsequent scenes, we see that Hammond's reaction to his death is largely one of annoyance. He's not concerned or upset that a worker died on his watch. He doesn't even bother meeting in person with the lawyer representing his investors. Hammond's lack of care is illustrated again by having his helicopter land right in the middle of the dig site, disrupting the work of the scientists and potentially damaging a valuable fossil. The film is making a point to show us that Hammond is a man used to having his way, unconcerned about how he affects the workers and scientists around him. Like many of the ultra-rich, he expects everyone around him to accommodate his desires. Spielberg knows that Attenborough is charismatic, and that the audience will like him. So he's taken this time to make these flaws apparent before we actually meet Hammond. Finally, we do see the man himself, raiding the fridge of our hard-working paleontological protagonists. One of the first things he does when confronted is point out how much money he's already paying them.
I can see that my 50,000 a year has been well spent.
He doesn't apologize, no. In his mind, his behavior is justified as the financier of the operation. He thinks he can do whatever he wants because he has money. We then see Hammond complain about lawyers.
We're going to open next year, that is if the lawyers don't kill me first. I don't care for lawyers.
Everyone hates lawyers, right? This is fairly innocuous, yeah? No. A man just died. Hammond clearly doesn't care. He's just annoyed that he has to go get outside approval for his pet project. He's smiling and cheerful because he feels nothing for the death of one of his workers. Again, I want to stress how much work Richard Attenborough is doing in making Hammond not appear like an absolute shitheel at this point. We next meet Dennis Nedry, who is the more overt villain of this piece. But even, again, this scene highlights that ultimately Hammond is at fault here.
Don't get cheap on me, Dodson. That was Hammond's mistake.
This, again, is covered more in the novel, but Nedry's grievances against Hammond are valid. He had the lowest bid on the contract to work on the park's computer systems, but found out only once he had signed on how massive the project really was. Hammond had deliberately understated how much work needed to be done. Nedry had every right to renegotiate his contract with Hammond to better match the scope of Jurassic Park, but Hammond refused. Again, Hammond cares very little for his employees. Nedry agreed to a figure, and Hammond doesn't care if that figure is actually fair. Of course, Nedry choosing corporate espionage as a solution to the problem is obviously bad, but that's not really the point of this video. And so, as we reach the island, one of the core progressive themes of the film is laid out. That without proper oversight, a billionaire capitalist cannot be trusted to have the best interests of his employees in mind. That, unregulated, the capitalist class will take shortcuts wherever they can, and that they will exploit the workers, and ignore all personal responsibility for the consequences of their company's actions. As we see our first dinosaur, there's another point I'd like to make. You can interpret Jurassic Park as a film about science run amok, but I say that the science succeeded spectacularly. I've always seen Jurassic Park as a film about how capitalism exploits science for profit, to the detriment of science. Jurassic Park fails because it's a park. If, instead, Hammond had made Jurassic Reserve, the island would have been safe. It is the pursuit of money that leads to disaster, not the science itself. Once we get to the tour of the lab facilities, the second progressive theme of feminism starts to appear. This is where we're introduced to the idea that dinosaurs are all female. Pairing this with the observation that the vast majority of park staff are men, we are presented with an organized group of men essentially repressing a female population, dictating their reproductive rights. The subsequent dinner scene is a big center point of the ethical and philosophical themes of the film. This is a spectacular sequence that deserves to be seen on its own, in the full context of the film. It is one point in the film where subtext simply becomes text. We see Gennaro is fully on board with the park, and greedily excited about the financial prospects.
We can charge anything we want, $2,000 a day, $10,000 a day, and people will pay it. And then there's the merchandise.
Meanwhile, Malcolm calls out both the scientific and capitalistic hubris of the project.
Genetic power is the most awesome force the planet's ever seen, but you wield it like a kid that's found his dad's gun. I'll tell you the problem with the scientific power that you're using here. It didn't require any discipline to attain it. You know, you read what others had done, and you took the next step. You didn't earn the knowledge for yourselves, so you don't take any responsibility for it. You stood on the shoulders of geniuses to accomplish something as fast as you could, and before you even knew what you had, you patented it and packaged it and slapped it on a plastic lunchbox, and now you're selling it. You want to sell it. Yeah, but your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they could, they didn't stop to think if they should.
You can definitely use this scene as an argument that the film critiques the science itself, but I see that more as a character trait of Malcolm, specifically. I think that the anti-capitalist theme is stronger throughout the film. Furthermore, if we take the sequel, The Lost World, into account, the theme is even stronger. But getting into The Lost World is beyond the scope of this video. Once the tour begins, we get a bit of cheeky dialogue from Ellie.
God creates dinosaurs. God destroys dinosaurs. God creates man. Man destroys God. Man creates dinosaurs.
Dinosaurs eat man. Woman inherits the earth.
Another overtly feministic moment. As the tour reaches the Triceratops exhibit, Ellie gets a larger moment to shine as she runs circles around the park's vet, Harding. Despite Ellie being only a paleobotanist, she quickly snaps into action diagnosing the trike. She immediately notices the trike's dilated pupils, a detail that Harding had missed completely, despite the problem being present in the trike herd for months. It was cut from the film, but Ellie's help does result in resolving the Triceratops problem with the reveal that poisonous berries, from the West Indian lilac, were swallowed alongside gizzard stones for grinding plant matter inside the trike's gizzard. This scene is also where we start to realize that Ellie is one of the most competent people on the island. Plus, she's not afraid to get her hands dirty. With a hurricane approaching the island, the tour turns back around and Nedry executes his planned sabotage to steal the dinosaur embryos for his big payday. Hammond's arrogant assumption of the park's infallibility results in a single bad actor being able to effectively take the entire park down. There are no redundancies in place. Hammond has cut too many corners. With the power out, the Rex is able to escape and attack the tour cars. It is during this sequence that the lawyer gets punished for his earlier greed during the dinner scene, by himself becoming dinner. When Muldoon goes out into the park to look for the tour vehicles, Ellie joins him without a moment of hesitation. While she could easily have been portrayed as out of her element, given that there is a T-Rex running around, she doesn't hesitate to start looking around. Ellie lingers when Muldoon is ready to leave, and discovers the second car. Furthermore, she recognizes the tracks leading away from the vehicle, recognizing that Grant has survived. Again, Ellie is shown here as extremely brave and competent. Upon returning to the visitor center, Ellie directly challenges Hammond's assertions of control. The flea circus story shows that Hammond is a bit of a charlatan, and so far hasn't really learned anything. Out in the park, we see that Grant has assumed a protective role over the children. A simpler film might have made him into an action star, and put a woman in the role of being the children's guardian. But Jurassic Park is not a simple film. Instead, Grant fulfills the more feminine role of looking after the children. It is also during this sequence that Grant finds hatched dinosaur eggs. The female dinosaur population has defeated the reproductive control mechanisms forced upon them by the park staff. Life has found a way. If you want, this development perhaps also allows you to view the dinosaurs of Jurassic Park as transgender icons. Back in the control room, the park staff continued trying to restore the computer systems. The decision is made to reboot the system, but as a result, the circuit breakers need to be reset. Arnold goes missing when heading to the maintenance shed, while Hammond continues to deflect responsibility. Ellie decides to go to the maintenance shed to deal with the breakers herself, and that is what spurs Muldoon into action. Ellie is the one taking initiative here. Further, Hammond's line here points out that this is a very intentional pro-feminist moment.
It ought to be me really going.
Why?
Well, I'm, and you're,
Look,
Come on, let's go.
we can discuss sexism and survival situations when I get back.
The journey to the maintenance shed reveals that the raptors are now loose due to the full reboot. Ellie and Muldoon split off. In the maintenance shed, Ellie succeeds where Arnold had failed, and resets the breakers, properly restoring power to the park. This is a crucial first step towards the rescue of the survivors, and it is no coincidence that once again, Ellie is the person taking action. Meanwhile, we have Muldoon's big moment. Now don't get me wrong, I really like Muldoon as a character, but he is fundamentally an embodiment of the Great White Hunter trope, and you could perhaps interpret this scene as a critique of colonialism, as the Great White Hunter is a symbol of that, or just more simply as a critique of the very concept of big game hunting. Either way, Muldoon pays the ultimate price as he underestimates the capabilities of the raptors. Once again, females triumph over an oppressor. Near the end of the film, the group reunite at the visitor center, and then go to the control room to reboot the systems while being harassed by the raptors. Lex, the other main female character, gets her moment here. Having earlier mentioned that she was a hacker, she is now the one who figures out the computer systems and finishes the full restoration of power started by Ellie. It is thanks to the combined efforts of both Ellie and Lex that the survivors are ultimately able to call for help and be rescued. If that isn't a feminist statement, I don't know what is.